Jeff Peterson from Heartland Farm Partners is our market analyst this week. With favorable weather most of this week, Nebraska farmers are likely close to finished with soybean harvest. Growers were 79% complete as of Sunday after advancing 22 points during the week, a weekly pace second only to Wisconsin. Corn harvest, meanwhile, continued to lag. Producers were 40% finished, 6 points behind the state's 5-year average. We talked with Jeff Friday morning to look at price movements as we close out October, but started by asking for an update on harvest results.
You know, it really kind of just depends on where you're at, Jeff, but nationally we're sitting at 59% harvested on the corn side. That compares to the 5-year average of 54%. Over on the soybean side, we're sitting at 77%. That compares back to the 5-year average at 68%. Overall, the yields are variable out there, but overall I'd say it's a little bit better than what we expected.
As you look at those yields, do you expect that to be reflected then in the next crop report?
You know, we do, and that's kind of a little bit different than we'd have said before. Overall, yeah, we do see that coming in slightly higher, not much higher, but a little bit higher. A couple things we're watching, though, is that there was 70% of actually the plots were actually taken into the labs and processed for this last report by USDA. So that's a pretty big amount, actually. So there shouldn't be a lot of surprises there. Over on the bean side, there was about 54% of those plots that were taken into the lab. Shouldn't be a lot of surprises, but we think it could still cause us a little bump in the yield.
Tell me how basis has moved as we've progressed through harvest.
Boy, you ask all the hard questions today, Jeff. It depends on where you are in the state. We've actually got some areas, as you go into south central Nebraska, they've actually stayed almost unchanged all the way through. But overall on corn, I'd say we go from about unchanged to all the way out to about 7 or 8 cents wider on the corn side. Soybeans would be unchanged to about 15 wider, just depending on the area.
Do you see that fluctuating a lot here as we finish up?
I think as we actually finish up, overall, I think the theme will be is that the grain buyers are going to say they got a few less bushels purchased than what they'd like. So we're actually looking for the basis to improve quite quickly once we get past harvest and get those last bushels tucked away.
Let's talk about corn sales, and we'll do it in 2 different ways. First, if you figured out that you ran out of storage here, the yields were just too good, what should you look to do with those extra bushels? You
know, we'd recommend storing those bushels, Jeff. We think you'll get a chance to see an improvement in basis. We are still looking for some higher prices down the road too, so overall I'd hang on and store those bushels if you can.
Overall, what's your thought on corn? Can we creep back above $4?
You know, and you phrased it correctly. I think it is a creeping process. We really kind of think the funds are at a point where they're willing to kind of buy some of these dips. We think the harvest lows are in, so I think we will creep higher. I do think it's reasonable to think we will get back up to $4, but it's going to take some time. It might be 2 or 3 months. And the thing we're kind of banking on is that we do think there's going to have to be some additional conditions that are going to have to come in to help us along the way.
Let's talk about limited space in soybeans. If you have those extra bushels, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, same thing there. We think we actually could see an even quicker improvement in basis on the soybeans, so I'd still hold on to the soybeans also.
And long term, are your thoughts maybe slightly bullish?
And I don't know if I'd go quite that far. I'd say they're supportive and we think we can gradually drift them higher. And a lot of that comes not necessarily because of the size of crop, because it was a good crop on both corn and beans in the U.S. and across the world. But it's really because we think there's some additional factors down the road that can kind of help us.
Let's talk about South America, and I assume that's playing in when you talk about corn and especially soybeans. What do we expect to see down there in terms of planted acres, bushels, how El Nino impacts production this year?
Yeah, I think as we look at South America, you said with El Nino, that's a big deal. And if it wasn't for El Nino, we probably wouldn't have the feeling that we do on the crops and the prices down the road. We think El Nino is going to be strong enough that it's going to give us weather scares, but we don't think it's going to be so strong that it's going to go ahead and cause us to have probably yield problems down there. We do think the area that it can impact, though, actually could be the palm oil. Indonesia and Malaysia are 2 big producers, and actually palm oil takes up about 36% of the world edible oils, so that's a big deal. And we think that could have some production problems with that, and that could spill over and give us some support on the soybean side.
Now, some people might say that as you see soybeans creep higher, we're also seeing Brazil put in 100 million metric tons this year, which would be a record. Those two things almost conflict a little bit. So they say, how do you weigh that out?
Yeah, they do, and I think in the end, it goes back to what I kind of said. In the end, I don't think we end up seeing their yields impacted, but in the short term, I think, between now and when they harvest, I think there'll be enough weather problems that could come in because of El Nino that could get the market a little bit concerned.
When you start to think about 2016 recommendations, tell me how production costs weigh in this year versus maybe next year.
You know, overall, we're factoring in slightly lower production costs than last year. We haven't came up with the exact number yet, but we're factoring in slightly lower costs overall.
Where do you think that sales might be appropriate for 2016?
You know, as we take a look at corn first, I would say that in that 420 area on these 2016 futures, that's an area where we'd like to make some sales. And over on the soybean side, I'd say if we could go ahead and see prices in the 920 to 950 area, we'd get started on the 16 crop.